All right, it's Wednesday. We're going to be doing homeroom just like we did on the old radio show, talking about public education in Wisconsin and also clearing up one of the misconceptions, shall we say, that is out there dealing with funding public education. Hello. Thanks for tuning in. Nice to have you along. I'm Pat Kreitlow. This is another beautiful morning up north on this Wednesday morning, February 4th. My guests this morning are Heather Dubois-Bournon, Chris Heimbuch-Boyle from the Wisconsin Public Education Network, and Chris Thiel, who is the Director of Legislative Advocacy Services for Milwaukee Public Schools. We will be talking about the 400-year veto and why it's a bullshit talking point coming up in just a bit. First, I do want to call attention to something we'll cover later on, the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program. And we have discussed that on the radio show before, but there was a committee hearing held this week at the state capitol about it. And I just have to say, I just posted to the page. So if you're at my Facebook page, just scroll down and you'll see it there. But I mean, there's just no other way to say what a bunch of crybabies as I listen to Republican legislators have this little tantrum because the state Supreme Court had the audacity to rein in the way they were abusing the rules process to hold up funding for a wildly popular bipartisan supported program, the Knowles Nelson Land Stewardship Program. And it just really strikes me how cavalier and secure you must be in your jobs to be able to tell, experts in things like land conservation that, you were on this lawsuit that made us stop doing the bad thing, so now we're not going to pass your bill. I'm sorry you got your fee-fees hurt, but that's how this works. And hopefully we will see a resumption of funding for land conservation in Wisconsin. But at the moment, the crybabies look like they're going to get their way. So I'm sure there'll be more written about it. There's a nice write-up in the Wisconsin Examiner that I would encourage everybody to take a look at. All right, still ahead, we'll have the history lesson for today, our Do Something calendar, a reminder of our question of the week about nuclear power plants. But at the moment, it's time to bring in some friends to talk about education. It's kind of our own little modified homeroom segment with Chris Heimbuch-Boyle, Heather Dubois-Bournon, and Chris Thiel. Good morning, friends. How are you?
Good morning.
Great. Good morning. Nice to be back.
Yeah, good to see you all. I know you're staying good and busy doing things for the Public Education Network, and in Chris's case for Milwaukee Public Schools as well. And I really couldn't wait to come back and talk to you again. We were thinking of doing it last week for so-called school choice week, and again talk about the budget behemoth that is the voucher program and how there needs to be more accountability and transparency about it. And I'll talk to Chris Heimbuch-Boyle about that in just a little bit. But you're going to hear us talking about the 400-year veto a lot because it is clear that in Republican caucuses and strategy meetings, they see this thing that Governor Evers did with the 2023 state budget, a little trick with, removing some numbers and things, as, a gimmick that they can use as a club to beat Democrats over the head this year. And we're just going to explain to you again so that you can explain to your friends and neighbors why that's a bunch of bull. Heather, normally I would defer to you, but I think last time I had you on, I set you up with that very question. And so if you don't mind, since we haven't had Chris here for a little while, Chris Thiel from MPS, Chris, I'm just going to give you the 400-year veto 101 question, because I know if it hasn't already happened, you're going to have a friend or a relative say to you, well, Chris, all I keep hearing about is my property taxes are higher because Governor Evers, did this 400-year veto. I can't believe the governor would do that. So when you're talking to that, brother-in-law or whoever, how do you explain it to them?
Pat, thanks. Yeah, I think what I would probably say is, under Governor Tommy Thompson, the situation was even more interesting because really what we're talking about is school funding. And the state having a constitutional obligation to fund our schools, or at least help fund our schools. And if the state doesn't pull its weight, then the rest of the weight falls on property taxes, and property taxes go up. So this is not a new phenomenon. Under Tommy Thompson, we used to have a standard where basic per pupil funding kept pace with the rate of inflation. The state would put enough what's called state aid or general aid into the pot. And that was a relationship that was explicitly created under Thompson in the early 90s to keep property taxes low. So this is not a new phenomenon. So what's happened, even though we're talking about the 400-year veto a lot, what that's really talking about is a situation where school districts now have a reliable adjustment of funding every year of $325 per pupil, which is actually less than the rate of inflation. So that's all it is. So they put that in place to at least give schools a floor. The next real question you have to ask is, okay, how much did the state put in? And if they didn't put in enough, is that going to increase your property taxes, right? So this whole phenomenon that we're seeing about property taxes really relates to, did the legislature make a decision to do its job back in July when they passed this most recent state budget? And in basically in a close to unprecedented move, the state didn't put any general aid in the pot. And they knew at that time that that would increase property taxes because, like I said, this is something that's been going on since the early 1990s. And if the state doesn't pull its weight, then that falls on the rest of us at the property tax level, at the school district level. And your local school district ends up looking like the bad guy because they have to make up for what the state didn't do. So I know it's phrased as a 400-year veto, but really the question is the state doing its job? Is the state funding schools? The answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who's pretending to be shocked in the legislature that property taxes went up is doing exactly that.
Oh, they're shocked in the way they were shocked in Casablanca. The same thing. Yes. I mean, even Scott Walker, whether he meant to, bolster the talking point or not, talked about what he called massive state aid that kept property taxes down. Now we can argue, about what Scott Walker's impact really was, but he at least, whether wittingly or unwittingly, called attention to the fact that if the legislature does not hold up its share in state aid and helping to keep up with inflation, well, then the local property taxes have to make up the difference. I feel like if Scott Walker and Tommy Thompson get that, why doesn't our Republican-led legislature get that?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think you're referencing a statement. I think Governor Walker tweeted the fact that he used to put massive amounts of state aid in there for the exact purpose of lowering property taxes. So you're exactly right. This is something that everybody knows about. Frankly, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau published a paper in July saying, "Hey, property taxes are going to go up." Right. So we knew that exactly the moment. I was in the room at the Joint Finance Committee meeting when they took the vote, and it was just kind of shocking because everybody knows the state has to put its share into the pot or else it will drive property taxes up. So they were kind of relying on this being in a small room and people not really understanding this topic. But again, the state doesn't do its part. They raise property taxes. That's exactly what's happened.
Heather, from a politically strategic standpoint, which I know you want to focus on education policy, but you watch enough of this, have you had that same light bulb moment that I did when you realized, oh, here's what they're going to do? They're just going to hit the 400-year veto because it sounds good. It probably poll tested really well. Are you surprised at all that that's the language we hear coming from the people in control of the legislature?
No, it's not surprising because it taps into a frustration that folks have all over the state, that they're sick and tired of having to go to the ballot box and raise taxes on themselves to pay for their public schools. Most folks don't know exactly why it is that their property taxes keep going up. And so I think it kind of plays into that confusion about how school funding really works. But hate to say I told you so, but this is exactly what we predicted. It's a spite budget, frankly, that forces local property taxpayers to foot the bill. And the state lawmakers are simply not doing their job in adequately funding public schools. And something's got to give here. We know that people will gladly raise their own taxes, even when they don't want to tighten their belts anymore to maintain excellent public schools at the local level. We have seen this over the state time and time again. And so the problem isn't, as it's being framed, people don't want their taxes to go to schools. The problem is the state simply isn't paying its share. So no one should be surprised by this political maneuvering. We've been seeing people play politics with our kids in their public schools for decades in this state. The question is, what's it going to take to get them to stop doing it? And how exactly can we leverage our people power to make sure that we're electing people who will do right by kids in public schools on both sides of the aisle?
And that takes us to Chris Hambuck-Boyle, who, just flits from town to town, district to district, talking to people throughout her part of the state about the impact of the budget and, the reaction, the action and then the reaction. The reaction would be, the potential of property taxes going up, although that can't happen without a referendum. And we have been seeing record amounts of referendums the past couple of years in Wisconsin. So, Chris, when I hear about again, people saying, well, because of the 400-year veto, there's going to be all these school referendums. Well, they're half right. It's not the 400-year veto, but Chris, are you tracking again a goodly number of referendums being scheduled for April? Might have to get you muted there. There you go.
I know. I have to remember to do that. I haven't been on here for a while. I sent you the data recently on what the numbers are looking like with the state, and I'm looking at them now. Right now, we have 59 districts going for an operating referendum, 10 districts for a capital referendum, 2 districts are doing both. That's 71 districts in April are going to referendum.
71.
So think about that.
Yeah.
And all of them are probably going for, they just went 2, 3, 4 years ago, and some of them are going for their second and third try. So that makes it even more dire and makes the gaps even bigger.
Do you think that the legislature putting, $0 new dollars into general aids actually helps communicate the problem better when you're trying to explain that it's not the 400-year veto? This is actually a situation that's been going on for a while. I mean, $0 carries a lot. I would argue is going to carry more weight than the number 400 years will.
Are you asking me that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I kind of put it in buckets because you take the $325, which, is pretty meek in the sense of not having the rate of inflation going on 18 years in this budget. And then you put the special ed piece that's mandated and not funded, some sufficient. Then you talk about, the referendums and the fact that, that piece is there, and then stick the vouchers. It's $1 billion a year now across the state, approximately, that is coming from taxes there. So people are starting to put those buckets together. I think legislators are too. I just spent some time with some, and they kind of look at me and I said, yep, that's all been state mandated. So who's responsible for that? Think about it.
So Chris Thiel last week was, so-called school choice week across the country, including at the state capitol. There were speakers at an event there. And again, it's easy language, much like 400-year veto. School choice is easy language to use. And then it's up to all the rest of us to explain the real world ramifications of that. So I'm sure there were a lot of messages that were shared last week, across the state, across the country, about the topic. Chris Hambuck-Boyle just explained how the price tag is approaching $1 billion a year. And so when I ask you what else should people know when they hear all of what they heard last week during School Choice Week, is it easy to pick one or two other things that parents and taxpayers should know about the so-called choice programs in Wisconsin and their impact on local public schools?
Yeah, I think what's interesting now, the Milwaukee program started way back in the early 1990s, and it was framed in a very specific way. It was only going to be in Milwaukee. It was only going to be for kids challenged by poverty. And, here we are in 2026, and you see kind of the wildfire spread across states like Florida and Arizona. And really, when you get away from, people always have kind of an emotional feeling about their own particular school, whether it's public or private. But when you raise it up to maybe the 50,000 foot level, and you ask after all this time, is this education policy working? This was something that was supposed to improve private schools. Somehow the competition was going to improve public schools. And really what we've seen is this policy used to be an excuse to defund public schools or underfund public schools. And frankly, you're not seeing school performance and student performance increasing. And in fact, some studies out there are showing that statewide, you've got lower school performance where these programs are put in place. So just from an education policy perspective, we've seen policies perform maybe better than this that have been sunset in other areas. So the claims made in the early 1990s, just at a minimum, are not playing out here in 2026.
So that takes us away from School Choice Week into, Heather, Public Schools Week, which is coming up later this month, and talk about the messages or activities that are going to be happening during that period, February 23rd.
Yeah, I'd love to. At the end of every February, we celebrate the public schools that the vast majority of folks around the state and around the nation gladly choose. We use that week to lift up all of the amazing things that are happening in our schools, the educators we appreciate, how students are shining where we live, and what we can do to support thriving public schools all over the state. And we'd like to invite folks to, 1, find ways to celebrate where you live. 2, join us in Madison on Friday, February 27, where we're having a day of action at noon. If you can't make it to Madison, we've got ways you can participate virtually from wherever you are. And let's use this opportunity to really call on lawmakers to say, we expect you to use this huge surplus you have to do right by kids, to undo the harm that was done in the last budget and the 18 budgets before it, or the 18 years of budgets before it, I should say, and fund our public schools at adequate levels. It's time to stop this cycle of endless underfunding and really restore some dignity and some balance to how we're doing public school funding in this state. So we're excited about all of that. And we have an exciting event that week as well. On Thursday, the 27th, we've invited some student organizers from Kentucky and Texas, who have been doing amazing things to fight for public schools in their state, including suing the state in Kentucky. And they're going to be in conversation with some high school students from Wisconsin who are taking action where they live as well. So join us for all of these things, and you can find out more details at wisconsonnetwork.org.
Again, wisconsonnetwork.org, so that you don't have to type out Wisconsin Public Education Network.org, just wisconsonnetwork.org. We'll get it to you. Chris Thiel, and working with the Milwaukee Public School District, as you know, with any major school district, anything this large in cities across the country, you're cursed by not being perfect, and therefore there's always something for political opponents to seize upon. And MPS is no different. Nobody's going to be making the case here that MPS has been perfectly run or managed, but it does, it is a taller order, it seems, to make the case why the state's largest school system is still in need of proper funding reform. I'm asking you to make the case, maybe not so much to the suburban listeners, they if they have hostilities, that's something that decades of talk radio have helped fester. But for folks all around the state who say, well, what is it? Aren't they big enough? And don't they get enough money already? And why don't we just take care of all of our little small rural districts? Can you make the case why taxpayers all across the state should want reform that also helps the kids in Milwaukee?
Well, thanks for that question, Pat. I think we've tried to position ourselves where what's good for the children in Milwaukee Public Schools is also good for the children in, Dodgeville, Wisconsin. Dodgeville is a place where they're going to go to referendum for the third time in like 4 years because the state's funding system is not funded. We could talk about whether or not it's broken and needs to be fixed as a system, but your car doesn't go if you don't put gas in it, right? And we're not putting enough gas in the car. So, we've got English language learners in Milwaukee, and we've got English language learners in rural communities across the state. We have students with disabilities in Milwaukee. We have students with disabilities in Dodgeville and other places across the state. And we've got kids challenged by poverty everywhere in the state of Wisconsin. So really the policies that we're working on that would help children in Milwaukee are the exact same policies that would help children everywhere. And, it's shocking. I may have said this in the past here, but we've been last in the nation in how we fund our students with disabilities. And the state not stepping in to do its part on that piece of funding alone is really driving a lot of these referenda that Chris was just mentioning, right? If we had the 60% reimbursement rate that the governor was calling for, you would have districts that wouldn't have to go to their local property taxpayers and ask them to raise taxes on themselves. And we're in a state, just kind of alluding back to the voucher discussion, where for some reason it's okay to give a 90% funding or 90% reimbursement rate for students with disabilities in private schools. But right now, today, public schools only get 35% reimbursement. That's a huge funding need that, if it was addressed even just a little bit, would solve a lot of funding problems and just put, a nice stable floor under our school districts. So we wouldn't, we've had hundreds of districts at this point go to referendum in the last 3 to 5 years. And we have 421 districts in the state. So that's not how the system is designed. The legislature, the state, has a constitution wherein it actually says the state has to fund Wisconsin schools. And that's just not happening at a constitutional level, arguably.
Yeah.
Right now.
We and that special education reimbursement is something we've discussed, quite frequently in these segments. So, Chris Hambuck-Boyle, that leads us to transparency about school funding. It is a complex, convoluted system. This isn't about changing the system, this next question, but it's about letting taxpayers know exactly what it is they're paying for, because to this point, for years and years and years and years, the payments that go toward the voucher school programs, the so-called choice programs, are just lumped right in to that school line on your property tax bill, and people think, oh my gosh, I'm paying all this money to my public school, when you're not. There's a chunk of it that's being skimmed off the top, in my words. And you don't get to know on the property tax bill just how much of your tax dollars are going away to these so-called choice programs. So you and others have been going from town to town, because the state legislature won't do it, saying, you guys have the power to do this on your local property tax bills. And we've talked at length about how Green Bay was the first and how they went about doing it. Chris, you've now been talking to other school districts about it. Is there still momentum building for more of these transparency efforts in school districts and communities around the state?
Definitely. Since Green Bay and we at our summit in July of last year, people are reaching in, and it's districts reaching in, but it's also community groups and community and taxpayers that are reaching in to help their community find out the amount that should go on their tax bill. The momentum is building. We're so excited and so thankful to Green Bay that they are the first to get it on the actual tax bill. We've got examples of more inserts into the tax bill. Ashland just did this in the last round of property taxes on a very short timetable so that their taxpayers are aware. But I think it isn't just the communities in the tax bill. I think it's legislators as well, in the sense that they're not quite knowing the proliferation of this as well. And the amounts are unbelievable when you look at even from last year to this year. I have some legislative information here for a legislator last year, 24-25, their privatization impact across, I think it's 54 districts, was 12.3 million. Okay. And this year, in one short year, it's 15.7. Last year, there was no impact from new independent charter schools. This year, there's over $600,000 being pulled from 4 different districts. They need to start looking at their own data to see what this looks like, not just the community people that we've been trying to get and educate about all of this, but the legislators need to do the same.
Without a doubt there. And so, again, if you want to learn more about this, I was just putting this up on screen there. There we go. Wisconsin Public Education Network. Learn more at wisconsonnetwork.org. Chris Steele, did we cover all the topics? Anything else we want to go over before we set you all free for your day?
I just think, re-emphasizing the fact that we're here at the tail end of this legislative session, and we found out recently that there is an additional $1.5 billion of revenue available for the legislature to use. And there are a couple of issues here. One, they created their own property tax crisis, right? And that blame's going to be foisted on schools. So they have the opportunity to put that money into the general aid pot that we've been talking about to lower property taxes. I'm a little concerned. I think last time I was on your show, we talked about the school levy tax credit. And we said you can't buy a crayon with the tax credit. So just putting that money into school funding rather than into a tax credit is the key here. And then instead of chasing our own tail in this state by not funding schools and then having to go to referenda and then trying to lower property taxes later, how about we just do the smart thing and we fund our schools up front, right? So they could use a portion of this additional revenue. The state's sitting on, if you include the rainy day fund, about $4.4 billion right now. And no matter what your school district is, if they funded students with disabilities, again, on the front end, then your local school district wouldn't have to ask you to go to referenda later on down the line. So they've got an opportunity to do the right thing. They've got the money to do it. We'll see what happens, but appreciate being on the show again.
Ask your legislator to do just that. Heather, any final thoughts or topics we missed this morning?
I just want to underline what Chris said. And the most important thing here is it's not too late. So if you are concerned about that and you'd like to see some of that surplus go where it belongs into our classrooms, let your lawmakers know that you want them to direct that aid so it really gets to kids and doesn't come back to us in the form of what Governor Evers himself called a shell game in that school levy tax credit, which isn't really aid that gets to kids at all. They need to keep their commitment and fund special ed at the minimum at the rate they said, but preferably at the rate we really need, which is at least 60%. And that's something that we have the funds to do right now. There's no excuse for not doing it. Let lawmakers know you're listening. Tools for how you can take action on that also at wisconsonnetwork.org. So please take a minute today to show your commitment in advance of Public Schools Week, which is February 23 to 27, and take action to support Wisconsin kids. They need your help.
All right. Heather, thank you very much. Chris Thiel, Director of Legislative Advocacy Services for Milwaukee Public Schools. Thank you. Chris Hambuck-Boyle, are you raising your hand? You got one more point for us? Yeah, go, Chris.
I do. I'm sorry. If people want to reach in about our toolkit, our privatization, go to Wisconsin Network /privatization. There you go. Thanks, Heather. And we're there to help. And also there are 2 bills right now that actually could get a hearing still maybe in February that are very, very important. One is the caps on bill because the caps come off, the percentage of
the
kids.
Enrollment caps. Yeah.
Yep. And for vouchers. And then the other one is the special ed promise bill. And that one's getting a little traction. And I think pulling at the heartstrings that all we're asking is 42% when you've heard 60 and 90 for privates, so I think that is something that hopefully will pull at the heartstrings of people who support public schools to call their legislator and say, isn't this something you should be doing?
Yeah, this is not the moon and stars. This is quite literally the least that they could be doing about this. Chris and Heather, always great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for visiting with me today.
Thanks again.
Thanks for having us. Have a great day, Pat.
You bet. Good to see all of you here and discussing these very important issues. All right, if you're going to be sticking around, and I hope you are, I've got our little Do Something calendar of events, but of course our history lesson up first. I'm Pat Kreitlow. Thanks for tuning in. All right, let's see. Let's do a little history lesson for this. Is it? No, that's not January 30th. See, I didn't change the date on that, so we'll just go without the banner here. Take my word for it. It's February 4th, and these are the history lesson items for February 4th. Birthdays today include Alice Cooper is 78 years old today. Country singer Clint Black is 64. Singer Natalie Imbruglia is 51 today. And singer Gavin DeGraw is 49 years old. One celestial birthday of note, that would be Rosa Parks, the civil rights activist who was born this day in 1913. On this day in 1789, the Electoral College met for the first time, holding a presidential election. And through the Electoral College, it's how it was unanimously ruled that George Washington would be the first president of the United States. Happy birthday to Facebook, I guess, since we're on there. Here, happy birthday, Zuck. The social networking site was founded this day in 2004 by Mark Zuckerberg and Eduardo Saverin. So 22 years old, Facebook is now. Got a few things on the music charts to share with you, just to give you some ideas for something else to listen to today. Let's see, let's go in order. So let's go back to 1984, the number one hit. Oh my gosh, 42 years ago. Wow. 1984 was Culture Club's Karma Chameleon. On this day in 1986, Janet Jackson, then 19 years old, released a little album called Control. And her life was never the same after that. 5 big hits, including the number one song, When I Think of You, along with the Pleasure Principle, the title track, and more. On this day in 2007, Prince wowed the Super Bowl halftime show, closing with a rendition of Purple Rain, In the Rain, that has been described as otherworldly and worth looking back at on YouTube before you get to Bad Bunny singing this weekend. Though I think the Bad Bunny show is going to be amazing. And I feel bad for anybody that feels the political need, like, I got to go watch Chris Rock. Really? Do you have to? Adele became the first female British artist to have 3 number one songs from the same album go to number one in the U.S. It was all off the album 21, and those songs were Set Fire to the Rain, Rollin' in the Deep, and Someone Like You. And finally, 2 years ago at the Grammys, Taylor Swift won Album of the Year for Midnights. It made her the first artist to win Album of the Year 4 times. Miley Cyrus got Record of the Year for Flowers. Billie Eilish took Song of the Year for What Was I Made For from the movie Barbie. All right, so we've got this new calendar of events that we're constantly trying to keep updated for you. And so let me pass along just a couple events, including from today. The Outagamie County Dems at the party office in Appleton this evening are having what they call a knit-in, as in knitting, knit-in and crochet ice away. That's the Outagamie County Democrats at 6:30 tonight at the party office in Appleton. This afternoon, the Vilas County Democrats are meeting with Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez about her campaign for governor and Ginger Murray on her campaign in the 7th Congressional District. And that reminds me, I just last night finished up the final video edits of an introductory video to the 3 Democrats who are running in the 7th Congressional District, Fred Clark, Chris Armstrong, and Ginger Murray. And so I'm looking to be posting that sometime in the next day or two on the Up North News social media sites. Friday is Drinks with Dems in Stoughton. Saturday in Oshkosh is the Winnebago County Democrats Coffee and Conversation. Also on Saturday, the Iowa County Democrats at the Winters Farmers Market. That'll be Saturday from 10 to noon at the Ridgeway Community Center. Chili and soup and pulled pork sliders, cornbread and dessert, all for a suggested donation of $10. All proceeds from this meal will be donated by the Iowa County Democrats to the Bonadea Project, which connects community members to shared resources and to the Ridgeway Volunteer Library. All right, finally, by the way, there's a lot of County Democratic Party notes on there. We're kind of expanding the net to get more other groups that are working on things. It's not a Democratic Party only one, although it appeared that way today. But again, if you've got groups and events that you want to tell me about, I checked. The email address still works, radio@upnorthnewswi.com. Again, radio@upnorthnewswi.com. All right, question of the week, a refresher on that. What do you think of a new nuclear power plant being proposed for Kewaunee? It wouldn't open up for another, 12 years or so. But the company that owns the site, says the new nuclear generation would be needed due to rising demand, in part from all the new data centers that are out there. Now, regardless of your feelings or the reason for the plant going up, what are your thoughts on new nuclear generation in eastern Wisconsin? You favor it, you oppose it, or you don't favor it, but you don't oppose it. You just wish it didn't have to be built. I'm giving you an out on that one instead of just saying I'm in favor. They operate safely. And if you're against it, maybe it's because of the potential dangers, or maybe it's because you really think we should be mandating more renewable sources to be used first. Want to know what you think. So to do that, you've got to sign up for my Sunday morning newsletter. Again, that's Sunday mornings with Pat Kreitlow. That's me. And sign up at upnorthnewswi.com. Click subscribe in the top banner, or upnorthnewswi.com/newsletter. All right, now coming up on Friday, usually I talk to Dr. Kristen Lyerly, but she will be away. And so our old friend Joe Zepecki is going to be joining me. He's on a tight schedule. We got 20 minutes, 9 o'clock to 9:20, and then he's got to go. He's a very busy fella. So Friday morning, we'll try to get started right on time. 20 minutes of Joe Zepecki talking about some of the latest headlines that are in there in Wisconsin and across the nation. All right. Again, thanks for signing up for the newsletters. Thanks for taking a little time today to hear from our guests. I hope you feel empowered and not overwhelmed as we all go about the daily challenges of putting America back on the right path. I'm Pat Kreitlow. We'll see you again soon for another beautiful morning up north.